Yeah, sorry, just give me a sec. I was just sorting out the recordings. But yeah, I think we are just about ready to hand over to Rachel, our final session of the day, much anticipated. So over to you, Rachel.
Thank you. Can you give me permission to share my screen?
We can already see your screen.
Oh, no, that's not me.
Oh, is it not? Okay, sorry. So hold on. Yeah, there we go. You should be able to share now.
Thank you. Can you see my presentation now?
We can, yes.
Is it the proper view so that you don't see my notes?
It is, yeah.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachel Fisher. I am the Member Services Librarian for Technical Services at Cooperative Computer Services, or CCS. It's a public library consortium in Illinois, in the Chicago area. And recently I published a paper on using Homosaurus in a public library consortium in library resources and technical services. It's published by the American Library Association, and was asked to present on my paper at the conference. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to present today. In the end of the slides, there is our resource page that has a link to the full paper so that you can read it if you're interested. CCS includes 29 member libraries in the northern and northwestern suburbs of Chicago, Illinois. These are the libraries in orange on the map, which is a bit out of date. The map is missing our 3 newest members. On May 19th, 2021, the Cataloging and Metadata Management, or CAM, technical group passed a motion to allow Homosaurus terms to be added to the catalog. Today, I will be introducing you to Homosaurus, the process that CCS went through to approve its usage in our shared catalog, and CCS local practices. I hope to provide you with helpful examples and recommendations to aid you in your quest for seeking approval to use the vocabulary. Since I do live in the United States, I would like to note before I go any further that I will be referring to Library of Congress subject headings, or LCSH, and Library of Congress genre form terms, or LCGFT, instead of headings that you may use in the UK. I'm unfamiliar with those subject headings that you use, but hopefully our experience in the United States will still resonate with you. The use of broad controlled vocabularies as a national standard has helped to standardize cataloging, make the creation of bibliographic records more efficient and affordable, and maintain a high level of quality of MARC records since the early 1900s. These are all important for providing access to patrons. Since the creation of the Subject Authority Cooperative Program, or SACO, in 1992, librarians have been able to propose new subject headings and revisions to LCSH and become more involved contributors in the evolution of controlled vocabularies. Library of Congress made a number of updates to LGBTQ+ terms in the 1990s and early 2000s. However, some of these changes were viewed as a compromise between the old status quo and the suggested term. Recently published research continues to critique LCSH terms for not properly representing the identity terms that are used when people research LGBTQIA+ topics. Examples of these LCSH terms include the umbrella terms of gays and sexual minorities. Gays is supposed to be used as an umbrella term for both gay and lesbian people. This could be confusing to library patrons because it is not the currently used umbrella term. Use for terminology frequently conflates the concepts of biological sex and gender identity. While LCSH has the term for queer theory, it does not have one for the identity term for queer people. Some of the more recently added terms, including gender nonconformity and gender nonconforming people. While I've heard them used on the internet, the notes say they should be used for non-binary people. These terms are not the preferred term for non-binary people. Trending search terms on the Google Trends website clearly show that the terms that are more frequently searched with than the LCSH terms, like sexual minorities, are the currently used terms, like queer and LGBTQ+. Without properly updating LCSH to reflect the terms that are being used for research, the library catalog will not be able to provide proper access to all materials on LGBTQIA+ topics. Published articles provide a few recommended solutions. The recommendations fall into two categories: an educational approach that does not affect the catalog, and a hands-on approach to changing the subject headings and how the catalog functions. The educational approaches are the most feasible for academic settings. These include the creation of LibGuides for subject headings, classification numbers, people, and organizations, and highlighting the problematic subject headings by engaging users in a dialogue about the catalog. Hands-on approaches require technical or cataloging expertise. The most practical is to use a supplementary controlled vocabulary. Changing how headings are displayed requires a discovery layer with that capability. The most technical and least practical is creating a customized ontology that accurately matches keyword searches to the subject headings in the catalog. So CCS chose the most practical solution for public libraries using a supplementary controlled vocabulary. Regarding LGBTQIA+ controlled vocabularies, there are two freely available online. Homosaurus is the more widely used vocabulary. The gender, sex, and sexual orientation ontology is another option, but it is geared towards a scientific or medical community and cites Homosaurus. So Homosaurus seemed to be the best option for public libraries. Some libraries have chosen to use local subject headings instead. So what is Homosaurus? Homosaurus is an international linked data vocabulary of LGBTQIA+ terms. This vocabulary is intended to function as a supplement to other broad controlled vocabularies, such as LCSH and LCGFT. Homosaurus is maintained by the Digital Transgender Archive and is regularly updated by an editorial board. It has been assigned the source code HOMOIT for use in OCLC records. An example of a heading for non-binary people is on the slide. Without a Library of Congress subject heading, some LGBTQIA+ headings can be completely left out of the record. One of the LGBTQIA+ topics that is not clearly visible in the library catalog is pansexuality. Pansexual may be in the summary, but it is not in the summary of all items that include pansexual characters. In the Ravenous Dark by A.M. Strickland is a great example of a hidden item. The OCLC record initially had no indicator that it is anything but a romantic fantasy with a love triangle that includes a spirit. Yet the Goodreads.com page includes an additional sentence describing the main character as pansexual. So this is a great example of an item that would benefit from the addition of the Homosaurus subject headings and genre terms that so that the item is properly labeled and accessible to those searching for LGBTQ+ fantasy or romance with pansexual characters. Although transgender subject headings exist, the current LCSH terms for non-binary people are not the currently preferred term. These are gender nonconformity and gender nonconforming people. Non-binary is the term that CCS patrons search with the most. Those who are non-binary would prefer to see it in the record due to the inherent bias of the term gender nonconformity. In addition to the term non-binary people, Homosaurus includes a number of other gender-related terms that are not LCSH yet and could improve the accessibility of items, like assigned female and assigned male. This slide highlights some other Homosaurus terms that are not LCSH, but are topics that are important to the LGBTQIA+ community. These include birth certificate amendments, corrective rape, genderqueer people, gender fluid, Latinx, and common slang. Homosaurus also includes terms in other languages that could be important to immigrants, like hijra, that is a commonly used term for intersex and transgender people in South Asia. Homosaurus also includes a number of genre headings that combine terms that would be normally two headings in LCGFT, like bisexual horror fiction and transgender horror fiction. As part of the decision-making process, I needed to conduct research to prove that Homosaurus headings would be beneficial. A CCS staff member created a report on several headings that were not LCSH yet, as well as the equivalent LCSH terms. Many searches were for known titles, so the terms on the screen are not the full form of the subject heading. Between 2018 and 2021, 65 searches were executed using the word non-binary, but only 11 for gender non-conforming people. In the same period, 163 searches included the word queer, and 104 for LGBTQ, but only 20 searches included the word sexual minorities. Likewise, more people search for polyamory than non-monogamous. Because most users look for known titles, users will search with more commonly used terms than LCSH terms, including the subject headings that are more closely aligned with the terms that users search with, and those that are commonly part of known titles are important for improving the accessibility of LGBTQIA+ topics in the catalog. Understanding the process that CCS uses to approve a new thesaurus may help you to pass the motion at your library or consortium. CCS members all utilize the same cataloging manual for local practices and have a shared catalog. Any workflow changes, like allowing Homosaurus, need to follow the consortium's decision-making procedures in order to be adopted. The CCS decision-making process consists of 4 tiers. When it comes to cataloging workflow, an advisor group consisting of 7 members can pass motions to recommend changes. CCS staff can advise the library staff on these changes at any point in the approval process. Then a technical group that consists of members from every library needs to vote on the recommendation to approve the policy. If the policy includes a change to the bibliographic input standards or completely replaces a subject heading, the officers from the governing board that make up the executive committee need to approve of the change. So any change in the catalog policy can take 2 or more months to be approved from the time that an issue is brought to an advisory or technical group. Because it was CCS's first time discussing the addition of a new thesaurus, the executive director wanted to make sure we had director buy-in before pursuing it further. So she brought the issue to the executive committee meeting. This committee consists of the officers and members at large of the governing board. In regards to Homosaurus, the committee stated that it is appropriate for CCS staff to work with library staff to move forward with allowing terms from additional thesauri without approval. Approval is only necessary when LCSH terms are replaced, such as with illegal aliens, which has already been done. The approval process for Homosaurus required more presentations and discussions than approving replacements for immigration headings. To get approval to allow Homosaurus in the catalog, I presented at the April 2021 Cataloging Advisory Group meeting, which is called SCRAP, stands for Standard Cataloging Rules and Practice. SCRAP members stated their concern about homonyms that contradict LCSH or common meanings, as well as sexually explicit terms. At the time, the group was willing to approve a motion to recommend that SCRAP reviews Homosaurus and selects the most appropriate terms for CCS. However, CCS staff discussed the SCRAP recommendation and had a different opinion. CCS's preference was for the Cataloging and Metadata Management, or CAM, technical group to vote on a motion to allow all terms from the Homosaurus vocabulary in the CCS database. The workload required to review, select, and maintain the list would not be the best use of an advisory group's time for the long run. After reviewing the vocabulary, we believed that any objectionable terms are more relevant to archives and special libraries than public libraries. We were also able to create a report comparing the search terms used by patrons to Homosaurus terms. This allowed us to create a solid list of homonyms with problematic meanings. A catalog handbook page could then include sufficient guidance on how to best use catalogers' judgment when selecting terms to apply to a record. The policy then needed to be brought to the CAM technical group for approval. So at the May technical group meeting, I presented an updated presentation on the topic, which included the advisory group's opinion and the CCS staff opinion. I explained how reports allowed us to identify terms to avoid, and that the cataloging manual would provide enough guidance on the terms that should be avoided without requiring the advisory group to regularly review Homosaurus, given that many of the Homosaurus terms are new and some would feel cautious about applying unfamiliar terms. CCS also planned to provide a training session with a member of the Homosaurus editorial board. The motion to allow Homosaurus passed unanimously. After the motion passed to allow Homosaurus, the cataloging advisory group and I worked on the Homosaurus page for the cataloging handbook. After the page was finalized, it needed to be approved at the Cataloging and Metadata Management Technical Group meeting. CCS will be retaining all LCSH terms and won't be replacing them with the Homosaurus terms. Catalogers won't add terms that duplicate LCSH or have the same meaning in a different word order. Genre headings will be placed in the 655, as is done with other genre terms, despite not distinguishing the genre heading from the subject heading in Homosaurus. The page includes a list of terms to avoid with more commonly used meanings that lack parenthetical qualifiers. CCS is also interested in accommodating search habits and identities by including the queer terms and equivalent LGBTQ+ term in a record at the same time. Initially, we opted to make all changes in-house and not use a vendor. A consortium staff librarian creates the authority records, and all library staff are allowed to use their cataloger's judgment to decide when to add Homosaurus terms. An example of a record that follows these guidelines is for the book Never Silent, Act Up, and My Life in Activism by Peter Staley. This is an autobiography of an AIDS activist. This case demonstrates the usage of the queer and LGBTQ+ headings to support the patrons who search with these terms. The record includes the LCSH subject headings for the author's name, the organization, AIDS Activists United States, AIDS Disease United States. The cataloger then added the Homosaurus subject heading, LGBTQ+ activists. At the time, there was no equivalent Homosaurus term for queer activists. Other Homosaurus subject headings, like AIDS activists, are used in the same manner with LCSH headings, so additional Homosaurus subject headings were not added. However, 3 Homosaurus genre headings were included. The record includes the LCGFT heading of autobiographies. The Homosaurus genre headings in the record include LGBTQ+ biographies, gay biographies, and queer biographies. This slide compares a MARC authority record that the CCS Data Services librarian created to the Homosaurus record for the term non-binary people. The preferred label is added to the 150. The terms in the alternative label field are added to the 450s. The URI for the linked data record is included in the 670 subfield U. While we decided that it was best for the authority records to be added only when the term was added to the catalog, Terry Reese has created a workflow for converting all Homosaurus files to MARC authority records using MARC Edit. I've included links to that documentation in the resources section at the end of the slides. So it's been 2 years since CCS member libraries began to use Homosaurus, and nearly all of the LGBTQIA+ records have Homosaurus headings in them. Librarians consistently add the Homosaurus headings to new records. To retroactively add headings to older records, we worked with Backstage Library Works to customize their service to bulk add the headings according to our local practices. The headings are now in 7,326 bibliographic records. There are also 372 authority records for Homosaurus headings. So I updated the slide to 403 authority records recently. And the only issue we encountered were records without Homosaurus headings being overlaid over the records with the headings. So I had to provide a bit of training in a meeting on identifying Homosaurus headings and preventing records from being overlaid. So when deviating from national practices, it's important to get buy-in from the administrators and librarians from all members of a consortium. So I'd like to conclude my presentation with some recommendations for getting buy-in. When planning to present on the topic, it is important to demonstrate how beneficial Homosaurus is. This can include examples of problematic subject headings and specific titles that would benefit from the addition of Homosaurus terms to the records. You can also add some headings to records and create authority records as examples. You are also welcome to use records from the CCS pack as examples. Feel free to search the pack with the Homosaurus terms in the list of terms that are linked to on the slide, generating reports of the actual searches that are executed in your catalog for Homosaurus terms, and LCSH can provide you with evidence of the most commonly used terms. It is also helpful to include the explanation of what should be included in the catalog handbook for your library or consortium. Feel free to use CCS's cataloging handbook page as an example, since some people are not familiar with LGBTQ+ terms. It is also beneficial to create a plan for training. Presentations that touch on all of these bases should be thorough enough to educate the decision makers at your library or consortium on Homosaurus in a manner that will make the issue understandable enough to hopefully gain the support needed to allow Homosaurus as CCS did. And when you gain access to the slides, you will see the resources page. It will have a link to my article with all of the resources, the Homosaurus website, the cataloging handbook that we call the Catalogers Wiki, and Terry Reese's documentation on MARC Edit. Are there any questions?
I haven't seen any questions in the chat, but please do put your hand up or put your questions in the chat for Rachel. Lots of people saying how useful and informative that was. So yeah, I'd like to echo that as well. That was really interesting. I'm not a catalogue, I don't have anything to do with it really, but yeah, it was very interesting and it sort of made me think a lot more about our catalogue records and how we could improve them. So thank you. Oh, yeah, someone said it's exciting to see this work being done at a public library system in the States. And yeah, I guess just to ask, I suppose from a UK perspective, what we hear mostly about the US and libraries at the moment is about book bans and things being challenged. And if you are comfortable to comment on this, I guess, what what has the experience been like of doing a project like this? Like, what kind of pushback have you had? Have you had pushback from the public, or you sort of mentioned a little bit about the staff and some kind of reservations from the board, but if you're comfortable to comment on that, that would be interesting to know.
Sure. CCS is luckily in a region of Illinois that's fairly liberal. We do serve 2 libraries in a county that's known for being conservative and votes typically for the conservative political party. But we haven't had any pushback from the staff or directors. They're very happy to update records with the headings that are aligned with the terms that patrons use the most. I have heard of some problems with bans or challenges in other counties. And I haven't been really following them very closely because they're not really problematic for CCS too much.
No, that's fair enough. Thank you. Darren.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, you've used the Homosaurus to improve your headings with regards to LGBTQ plus communities. Have you had any similar calls from other marginalised communities to use community-driven sort of terminology within headings?
Yes, we currently have a metadata networking group in Illinois that's open to all librarians in the state of Illinois. And we are currently working on creating a website for recommendations for different marginalized groups. And so we have separate working groups for different topics, and we'll eventually finish it and publicize it to listservs like AutoCAT. So if you're following listservs like AutoCAT, you'll probably see an announcement in the next several years or 2 when we've completely finished.
That's great, thank you.
Great. Again, I don't think I've seen any questions in the chat, but lots of people thanking you for this presentation and mentioning and commenting. So yeah, that was really great. Thank you so much, Rachel. We really appreciate you joining us. And yeah, so we are going to go into our wrap up and close. So if you just give us a minute or so to get ourselves sorted, and then we will close up the conference.